All right, y'all. So we have a big scandal that broke the other day. News came out that NBC was going to hire Ronna McDaniel. Now, Ronna McDaniel, that name may sound familiar to you. She used to be Ronna McDaniel Romney, I believe was her name. I think Trump made her drop the Romney thing because he doesn't like Mitt Romney. And she was the head of the RNC. So big-time Republican player. Well, now she was basically ousted from that role. Trump wanted her gone. Now you have Laura Trump is like the second in command at the RNC, but in reality, she's really the first in command, and she's basically rigging the RNC in 1,000 ways to make sure the money goes first and foremost to Trump and his legal woes before it goes to anybody else in the Republican Party. So I actually support what they're doing with the RNC because it's just going to tank Republicans across the country. I love the fact that Laura Trump is like one of the top people in command there and how she's going to absolutely destroy the organization. But so it's not like Ronna McDaniel did a good job, right? And I think like Charlie Kirk had it out for her. There was a big feud and, you know, they think she's a loser. Well, whatever. So she ends up getting ousted and NBC rushes in, give her a lifeline and goes to hire her. Now, the reason why this became a massive story is because, look, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, let's call it what it is. These are the preferred news networks of the resistance liberals, of the standard status quo normie Democrats. And they hate Trump, they hate MAGA Republicans, and they want their news to be down the line pro-Democrat Party type stuff. Maybe they'll accept a little sprinkle of enlightened centrism in there. You know, you could have some token Republicans or token conservatives, but they like their conservatives to be anti-Trump, never Trump types, right? Like this is the formula of those networks. So NBC steps in and hires her, and all hell breaks loose. I mean, I'm talking every single well-known Democratic-type pundit loses their mind and is like, this is the problem. This is the problem with these networks. So the other big point here, which I think is a fair point, is that there's a million conservatives you could hire who did not aid and abet a literal attempt to overthrow the last election. Ronna McDaniel played a key role in trying to overturn the 2020 election. And now NBC hires her. Okay, so let's dive into some of the backlash. So she goes on Meet the Press, does an interview, and it's a pretty aggressive interview here. Let's watch it, and then I'll show you some more stuff after this as well.
We can't have one standard for Democrat election workers and not Republican.
But Ronna, ultimately, there were 250 audits. They never found there was any corruption. Did you not have a responsibility as the RNC chair to say before January 6th, the election is not rigged, that Donald Trump lost, given that there were audits, given that there were more than 60 court cases that occurred all across the country, and that Donald Trump lost?
The reality is Joe Biden won. He's the president. He's the legitimate president. I have always said, and I continue to say, there were issues in 2020. I believe that both can be true. You can say massive laws were changed. They were changed through courts or through secretaries of state and not through the legislative process in the name of the pandemic that took away safeguards to the election.
But you acknowledge those, what you're talking about, did not rise to the level in any way of overturning any of the state's election
in November,
results.
which, by the way, is when that call took place, in November.
Yeah.
The election happens in November. We're getting so much incoming. Yeah. We have a job to say this was done correctly. Yeah. And I'll just finish about Wayne County. Yeah. You know, there were precincts that didn't align. That's a fact. That's not propaganda. That's a fact. So why can't you say, hey, listen, these precincts aren't aligning. Let's take a look under the hood.
Let me just stop you because you just said Joe Biden's a legitimately elected president. This is the first time you have said this.
It's not. I have said it many times.
Well, this is what you said a year ago to Chris Wallace. I want to play you what you said.
Are you saying, as the chair of the Republican Party, that you still have questions as to whether or not Joe Biden was the duly elected president?
Joe Biden's the president.
No, I didn't ask you whether he's the president.
No, I don't think that. I think
Do you
there were
think
lots of problems.
he won the election?
I think there were lots of problems with 2020.
Do you think
he won the election.
Pardon?
But ultimately, he won the election. But there were lots of problems with the 2020 election. 100%.
And that's fair.
But I don't think he won it fair. I don't. I'm not going to say that.
So you didn't say he won it fair at that point. Can you say, as you sit here today, did Joe Biden win the election fair and square?
He won. He's the legitimate president.
Fair and square?
Fair and square, he won. It's certified. It's done. But I do think, Kristen, let me just say something.
To say that. Why has it taken you until now to be able to say that?
I'm going to push back a little because I do think it's fair to say there were problems in 2020. And to say that does not mean he's not the legitimate president.
But Ronna, when you say that, it suggests that there was something wrong with the election. And you know that the election was the most heavily scrutinized. Chris Krebs said it was the most secure election in modern history. When you say there were problems, it suggests still that you're giving credence to these allegations.
You have states like Pennsylvania go from 260,000 mail ballots in 2016 to 2.6 million, saying, you know what, when you get rid of ID for all mail-in ballots, that's a concern.
This is what I call soft election denialism. You have the people who are all in the stop the steal stuff, the no, Trump won, and they literally like hacked the voting machines and rigged it, and Hugo Chavez was involved even though he's dead. And like, you have the extreme election denialists, and then you have the soft election denialists. And then there's even one level below this, which is like the Vivek Ramaswamy position, which is like, yes, the election was rigged, but on the way Trump says it was rigged because the media was basically doing a nonstop ad for Joe Biden and hiding the Hunter Biden story. And if that was reported on, honestly, Trump would have won. There you have different levels, this election denialism stuff. She's squarely in the soft election denialism camp. And this is why people are furious, because they're saying, hold on now, what she's saying is not true. And she's planting the seeds of doubt while obfuscating and deflecting. Oh, no, he is the president. Okay, yeah, he won, but there were problems. And as is rightly pointed out, the implication there is the problems rose to the level of having Trump would have won effectively. She's not saying that part, but it's implied with the, oh, there were real problems. So, yeah, this is, the viewers of NBC are not going to like this. By the way, this is objectively untrue. So there's a problem on that front as well. Just like you're regurgitating things that are factually incorrect that we all know this. And by the way, do you really want to feed into, I don't even know what the number is anymore with Republicans, certainly over 50%, maybe over 70% of Republican voters are like, yeah, I think Trump won the last election. Do you really want to feed into that? But like, yes is the answer. She does. And NBC hired her. So let's finish this up, then I got more for you.
Custody, integrity of every ballot. But that's all I'm saying. And you know what? This is a viewpoint of a lot of Republicans, and they think Joe Biden's the president, but they also think there were problems, and both can be true.
But even the Supreme Court, Ronna, didn't take up concerns about the election results in Pennsylvania and a slew of other states. Let me just stick to, though. I want to allow you to continue to answer questions about your role.
Okay. So you get that. In response to the backlash, look at this, in Mediaite, Ronna McDaniel will not appear on MSNBC amid internal backlash over her hire at NBC News. So they move her. It's going to be MSNBC and NBC. Now it's like, oh, no, it's definitely not MSNBC. Bro, we weren't going to do that at all. I don't even know what you're talking about. So clearly they saw the colossal backlash and they were like, okay, all right, okay, not on MSNBC. So they're like softening it a little bit. Then we also get this. Chuck Todd, or as I call him, Human Oatmeal, he went on Meet the Press and he shot, to my surprise, really unleashed on management and the bosses here and says some devastating stuff. Watch this.
Look, let me deal with the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation because I don't know what to believe. She is now a paid contributor by NBC News. So I have no idea whether any answer she gave to you was because she didn't want to mess up her contract. She wants us to believe that she was speaking for the RNC when the RNC was paying for her. So she has credibility issues that she still has to deal with.
Yeah.
Is she speaking for herself or is she speaking on behalf of who's paying her? Once at the RNC, she did say that, hey, I'm speaking for the party. I get that. That's part of the job. So what about here? I will say this. I think your interview did a good job of exposing, I think, many of the contradictions. And look, there's a reason why there's a lot of journalists at NBC News uncomfortable with this because many of our professional dealings with the RNC over the last 6 years have been met with gaslighting, have been met with character assassination. So it is, you know, that's where you begin here. And so when NBC made the decision to give her NBC News' credibility, you got to ask yourself, what does she bring NBC News? And when we make deals like this, and I've been at this company a long time, you're doing it for access to audience. Sometimes it's access to an individual.
That's quite an admission. We know why you're hiring her. It's because you want access. You want access, in theory, to the audience, but in reality to whoever her connections are, right? Wow, what an admission.
And we can have a journalistic ethics debate about that. And I'm willing to have that debate. And if you told me we were hiring her as a technical advisor to the Republican convention, I think that would be certainly defensible. If you told me we're talking to her, but let's see how she does in some interviews and maybe vet her with actual journalists inside the network, see if it's a two-way, what she can bring the network. So I do think, unfortunately, this interview is always going to be looked through the prism of who is she speaking for? right? I think you did everything you could do. You got put into an impossible situation, booking this interview, and then all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from under you. You find out she's being paid to show up. It's unfortunate for this program, but I am glad you did the best that you could, and that's why the three of us are on here to try to bolster that editorial independence.
So look, what I would say to this is CNN does this. They have a history of doing, they brought on Rick Santorum well after it was proven and known the guy's a total freak and a fraud and a loser. You could point to NBC and MSNBC doing the same thing. I mean, Morning Joe is the morning show, and it's one of their top ranked programs, I think, and he's on for like a zillion hours, and he's a former Republican, right? This is not new, what they're doing here. And what you have is CNN and MSNBC, they know they're and NBC, they know they're accused all the time from the right, liberal bias, liberal bias, liberal bias, liberal bias, liberal bias. And so in an attempt to sort of combat that narrative, they go, no, look, hey, we hired Ronna McDaniel. Hey, look, we hired Rick Santorum. Hey, look, we hired fill in the blank with whatever weirdo freak establishment Republican they brought in. That's their trick to try to deflect that. Now, my issue with it is this. When you look at the Overton window, which is the spectrum of debate that's allowed in polite society on corporate media, when you look at the Overton window, the right fringe of that is often La La Land, where you can hire somebody like Ronna McDaniel, who literally took part in trying to overthrow the last election. And it's just viewed as, well, I mean, look, she represents the voice of Republicans. There's a lot of Republicans in this country. Why the hell not? But that's allowed in the room. Somebody who took part in trying to overthrow the election is allowed in the room. What's not allowed in the room is anybody in the mold of Bernie Sanders, right? You don't have anybody on there advocating for Medicare for all and the PRO Act and collective bargaining and really aggressive against Israel and pro-Palestine. And so, like, the spectrum on the left is limited to, the furthest left you go is like Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden, just standard corporate Democrat defenders. That's the left edge of the Overton window that's allowed. On the right edge of the spectrum, there is no end to the right edge. Again, CNN hired Rick Santorum, a literal theocrat, like a Christian fundamentalist who wants to use government to impose that on everybody. Massive, massive Trump defenders who go along with him with the election was stolen in 2020, all that stuff. So the Overton window, I would be fine. If you want to allow on some crazies on the right, I'd be fine with that, as long as you also allow on real lefties. But they don't. So either allow on people who are actually on the left and have them on regularly as much as you have on the right-wingers, or if you're going to limit the Overton window, let's limit it in a way that's reasonable, where you correctly say, hey, anybody who tried to overthrow the election and played a role in that the last time, they're kicked out of polite society. We no longer allow them in the room to act like they have a point when they don't have a point. It's not even close to having a point. Over 60 court cases proved that Trump did not win the election. You had the Arizona audit where Trump and his people said, no, but he actually won. Trump actually won Arizona. Then they did the audit and found not only that Biden won, he won by more than they thought he won by on election day. His votes were undercounted. So either, if you want to allow in the crazy fringe people on the right, okay, but where are my lefties? Bring in just as many lefties and give them just as much airtime. If you're not going to do that, then no. I don't want you to hire Ronna McDaniel either. If you're going to limit the Overton window, limit it in a way that is more respectable than this psycho shit you're doing right now. Right? Look, I understand. It is true. There are a very large number of Republicans believe the election was stolen. I understand that. And so, in a sense, you're like representing those people, by having her on the air. And it's like, fair enough. There's also a very large number of Americans who believe the Earth is 6,000 years old and creationism is true. There's some percentage of flat earthers. Are we mandated to represent them too? Are we or are we not? So that's my issue with this. I actually agree with the backlash to a large extent. And, you could point out, well, they always do political hacks on the Democratic side, right? They do. Jen Psaki is hired. I mean, of course. And that gets to the question of like, well, what's the point of these networks? If we all have grandfathered in that Fox News is the Republican hack propagandist network, I don't wish they were that, but they are that. It's the Republican Defense Network and the Donald Trump Propaganda Network. If that's what they are, okay. They can be that. And they throw on the occasional liberal to smack them around the set all the time, right? 1 out of every 12 hosts is that. Well, okay, then if we're going to do the mirror image of that on the MSNBC side and the NBC side, then do the mirror image of that. Don't try to, oh my God, no, we're not liberally biased at all, bro. We're just going to, bro, I don't know what you're talking about. Here, look, we invited on 5 new Republicans. Who cares about the backlash? Fox News doesn't adjust because people rightly point out, hey, you guys are Republican hacks. So, like, what are we doing here? And so then you see, what happens with the Overton window. You have Fox News, Newsmax, One America News. They are dyed-in-the-wool, hardcore conservative network. That's what they are. And on the Democratic side, they're actually not even that. It's enlightened centrist networks because, hey, we bring on people of all different ideological stripes, bro. And you're giving everybody the misimpression. If Fox News and the right-wing networks entertain the stolen election bullshit, and now NBC and MSNBC and CNN entertain the stolen election bullshit, you're giving people the false impression that this thing is still debatable, that this thing is still up in the air, that reasonable people could disagree. But reasonable people don't disagree. The debate is biased and skewed in a direction of untruths, let's say, in a direction of lies. And that's the problem with this, right? It's like the media loves, like, oh, this is a maverick we're bringing into this network. They love that story as long as the maverick nature cuts in the right-wing direction. It's like with John Fetterman. We're going to cover a story on him tomorrow where Fox News was sucking him off. Because, oh my God, a maverick, a truth teller. Why? Because he's a Democrat saying right-wing things now. They never do that in the other direction. If a Republican all of a sudden comes out and says, I'm in favor of Medicare for all and free Palestine or something, nobody's going to do the segment, oh, maverick. No, then they're kicked out of polite society if a conservative starts saying some left-wing stuff. So the game is rigged. The game is rigged here. And let's not pretend like the stolen election stuff is legitimate and debatable. What does this woman add to the network? Nothing. Nothing at all. The point is the access likely. You bring her on, you pay her, and then you're buying her and all of her connections. Maybe you get some inside information coming out, leaks in the Trump administration or from the Trump campaign, and then you can run the stories on NBC. My guess is that's what's going on. But in the meantime, they're also going to have her on air to spew all sorts of misinformation and falsehoods and nonsense. And so, again, look, you want to do this game where you bring on some psycho people with psycho beliefs? Okay. At the very least, give me an equal number of people on the left who are actually on the left. But they'll never do that. So instead, we get the Democratic networks, the liberal networks are actually enlightened centrist networks. And the conservative networks are that, very conservative. Skews the debate completely. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.